Welcome to Jewish Life. I'm Susie Kaufer. Thanks for joining us tonight. We have a great show for you. We have a very special guest, a couple that are both educators and parents, and they are married to each other. I think that's the definition of a couple usually. And they're wonderful. We're thrilled to have them. It was tricky to get the schedule going, but they're here, and it's a late night show tonight in Goleta. So please help me welcome Joel and Alisse Block. Welcome, Joel and Alisse.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. As I say, I know it was a little tricky getting us all scheduled tonight. We all have busy schedules, and I really, really appreciate you coming on. You're a very special couple, and I really want to find out about all the ins and outs of the Jewish world that you live in and teach in. And I guess I'd like to start out when your Jewish education began for both of you.
Well, I started Sunday school at age 5, and I actually didn't like it. It wasn't interesting enough for me. And so my mother changed me from just plain Sunday school to Hebrew school at that age, and I loved it. It was great until I got older, but we'll talk about that.
And what's the difference exactly?
At Sunday school, they were just doing holidays, lots of arts and crafts. And in Hebrew school, it was, first of all, it was more than just Sundays. It was Sundays and Wednesdays when I first began. And we were really learning to speak a little bit of Hebrew and to read Hebrew and Hebrew songs. It wasn't just arts and crafts and kind of fluffy stuff.
Nice. And how about you?
I started at 5. I loved it. I mean, I had a great time in it. I was, though, considered a real troublemaker, but they tolerated me because I was one of the few who actually was interested in what we were doing and wanted to learn to read Hebrew and to read from the Torah. And I was lucky that when I went to religious school, was in Ohio, near Cincinnati, and we had rabbinic students were all the teachers.
Wow.
But he got young,
I got
excited
young
teachers.
people who were very into what they were
wonderful.
teaching because they were also studying to be rabbis.
Wow. And were they studying there at the yeshiva?
Well, I was at Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, which I lived in Dayton, which is 45 minutes away, and that's what they did to earn extra money.
Nice.
And taught Hebrew school.
And where were you when you first started learning?
I was born and raised in LA, so we attended a synagogue in the San Fernando Valley. It was a traditional synagogue, conservative synagogue, but it was very progressive, and our rabbi was one of the first rabbis in the area to allow girls to become bat mitzvah.
Wow.
It was just a few years before I became bat mitzvah that they started.
Nice. And was that within the Reformed tradition?
Conservative.
Conservative,
Yeah.
I see. Very good.
But
And,
but like Joel, I was a problem child in Hebrew school also. But not until I was older, I loved learning. But for some reason, by 4th grade, I think I figured out that all of my friends were outside playing during Hebrew school time, and it went from twice a week to 3 times a week. And so I became the problem child. So I'm convinced that I learned how to become a director of education by spending so much time in the office of our director of education.
Wow. So you had a lot of formal training then?
Yes.
To become this kind of educator. And how long did that training go on for?
Well, we both attended Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles, where they have a program for educators.
Is that where you met?
No, I
really.
was a few years ahead of Joel in school, and the program itself is a 3-year program. The first year was in Israel, and then the following 2 years were both in Los Angeles. But we actually used to attend the same educational conferences. And so we met at an educational conference, and we became really good friends, and it was kind of a long-term relationship,
Well,
too, friendship.
We probably got married, I think, 10 years or more after we started
We
seeing
started
each other.
dating 10 years after
Yes.
we first met.
Right after conferences.
Right, but of course, we had such similar interests insofar as education was concerned and how we wanted our Jewish lives to be. Our family goals were the same, so, it was.
So it was
It was
important
great.
to both of you,
Yes.
Jewish
Oh,
education.
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
And was that something that came from your parents mostly? Or?
Well, my father, it's interesting, my father was raised Orthodox, but he was of the generation that his father immigrated here. He was of the generation that really wanted to assimilate. So he became very active, as far as he went, in what was called classical Reform Judaism, which means basically they were almost Protestant in style, even though, of course, they did Hebrew and they did everything Jewishly. But he was not very committed when he was an adult. And my mom was basically raised secular without much religion, though she was confirmed, one of the early confirmation classes in this country, actually. But never had they did that at 13 for her in a Reformed synagogue in Chicago. So, and my family was not raised very religiously at all. But I became interested in it through camping, Jewish summer camping and youth group.
Mm-hmm. Did you go to overnight camp?
Oh yeah, yes. And then I worked at overnight camps, 20 years, more or less. I went for many, many years. All my best friends were from that camp, and it had a high percentage went on to become rabbis and educators.
Wow.
Right.
Wow, that's really cool.
A large percentage of the kids that I went to Hebrew school with became rabbis and cantors. And I went to Hebrew school from kindergarten through 12th grade. Yeah, it was a long-term commitment. And it's amazing to see how many of the kids with whom I was raised became rabbis and cantors also. Although I did not go to the Jewish summer camp, many of them did, but I didn't have the opportunity to do that.
And what motivated you to become a full-time professional, or I assume you're a full-time professional Jewish
Well, I'm not
educator?
full-time now, but I was full-time from the time I completed the master's degree program at HUC, really until after we were married and just before we decided to have a child. So for about 20 years, I was a full-time director of education. I worked in Oakland. Immediately after HUC, I worked at a synagogue in Seattle. And then after a few years, I took a job in Oakland, California, and then moved to St. Louis, Missouri to be with Joel.
And did you have an age group that you focused on, or you were more
All
interested in?
the schools that I ran were from kindergarten through 10th grade, at least, and some kindergarten through 12th grade.
That's a big scope. And how about you?
Well, mine was very similar, though I went directly from the camping, Reformed Jewish camping movement, directly into Hebrew Union College. I mean, that was a big recruiting ground for Hebrew Union College, particularly when I was there. And we, as Alisse said earlier, we did pretty much the same program. There were a few differences. So I came out with director of education, first worked in Chicago, and then Cincinnati and St. Louis, and then here in Santa Barbara at the synagogue where I was director of education for 6 years.
We moved here from St. Louis, Missouri, because Joel accepted the job as director of education at Congregation B'nai B'rith.
I see.
So it was a great move.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And what about philosophy? What do you have a philosophy about Jewish education in terms of how you think of it, or how you feel it should be, or how it's been for you in terms of what you've been able to offer people?
Well, I think we each have a philosophy, and they're not necessarily the same.
Well, we've never actually compared them.
Right.
Well, maybe we can do that a little bit.
Go ahead.
Public. Well, for me, I really believe that learning is a lifelong process, especially Jewish learning. And it starts in the home, hopefully, when children are very, very young, and continues all through adulthood. I think to a great extent many parents, many families focus on getting children through their bar bat mitzvah services, and then many feel no need to continue. Part of the problem with that is if we allowed them to drop out of general school at age 13, what would their lives be like? What would they be doing with their lives if they discontinued any studies at age 13? At 13, they were not really capable of, I believe, of making that kind of a decision. And just as we as parents make all sorts of decisions for our child, who their doctor will be, or, do you ever give your child really the choice whether or not they should shower or bathe or brush their teeth? So I get confused why parents would give children a choice of whether or not they attend Hebrew school or not. The Torah is always compared to a tree of life. And for me, it brings life to our home and, together and with our child, of course. And so to end one's education Jewishly at age 13, you're only in infancy as far as Jewish learning is concerned. So I would like to see people certainly take classes through adulthood. And, if you take a Hebrew class as an older adult, it really helps your brain. It stimulates your brain. It staves off Alzheimer's. Hebrew is a good thing, and it's good for us to teach, adults also. And so I not only teach children, but I do adult education as well through the synagogue.
Wonderful. I've heard that the actual study of the Hebrew letters themselves makes you smarter, and not just learning a language, but the actual letters and
Sure.
learning.
Learning different symbol system is very important.
and particularly the Hebrew symbols.
Right, and there are many adults who don't feel that they're capable of learning. So we'll get you. And some who have tried and have not been successful, but I have all kinds of little tricks that I like to use with both children and adults.
Do you have any tricks you could show us
Well,
right now?
I brought a couple. I brought some flashcards.
That would be fantastic.
And so this is a samech.
Okay, can we? Oh, that's nice.
Samech,
And it
and-
sort of matches your shirt. a
Oh,
little
not on
bit, too.
purpose.
I like
And
that.
Susie, what's the shape of this letter?
Circle.
It's circular, and it's a samech.
I see.
A
So it
samech
sounds
is
like-
circular, okay? And this is
I didn't know I was going to be quizzed there. I wouldn't have asked you.
This is a resh.
A
and,
resh, okay.
And the back of the resh is rounded.
Okay.
Okay, so-
Okay, so little
Just
pneumatics.
little kind of mnemonic devices to a certain extent. This is the profile of a face. So you can see, like, it has sort of a pompadour hairdo.
I can see the profile,
And
yeah.
here's the nose and the
Okay.
mouth, okay?
And what's that?
This is a fey, and it looks like a face. And it has a partner letter,
Wow.
which is a pay. It's a face with a pimple.
Aww.
The face has a pimple.
A
So it has a
pimple.
p sound versus a f sound.
That's good. So there's a little tricks to
All kinds
to-
of
to
tricks. Here, I'll
memorize.
show you this one. This is a bet. The bet has a belly button. Its complementary letter is a vet.
Huh.
The belly button has been vacuumed out, and this is now vacant. So
Nice.
belly button,
You could
vacant.
do a whole show on air of this. This might
Now
be a
wait,
new
one
thing
more,
for you.
just one more.
This is good.
The bet, you can tell the bet because the bottom extends beyond the back. And one of my students recently told me it's sort of like an anatomical part,
Okay.
a butt, excuse me.
Ah, okay. the
Not
B-
nice. I
the
like
B
the
word.
I like it that the bottom extends beyond the back. But it looks very similar to this letter,
It does.
which is a cough. And a student just yesterday, I said, well, how can we tell the difference between these two? And she said, this one is curved, and it sounds like a k.
Okay.
It also has a cough drop in its throat. So it's curved, and it has a cough drop. So I try to make it fun for
It is fun.
the adults and kids.
Wow.
To
That's a
learn,
whole little
and-
system here that you.
You know, it keeps me busy.
That's good. That's really good.
But I think the thing that inspires me, or one of the things that really inspires me about teaching, is learning from my students. My student, little Eliza, yesterday, she's just learning the alphabet, and
How
she
old
said
is she?
she is 11. She's a sixth grader, and so she said, "Oh, but Alisse, this one's curved." And I said, "Oh, I'm going to use that from now on." So this curved is dedicated to Eliza.
That's nice. And how about you, Joel? You have any? How does Jewish thoughts and the Torah reflect in your teachings?
Well, my
Work.
philosophy is very similar. I mean, I talk about learning and teaching from cradle to grave. But for me, I think education is where everything else flows from. I mean, you can learn the rituals, you can learn history, you can learn all these things to do, but the desire to do them generally comes from an understanding of our past and our history and where we've been and where we've gotten to. So my philosophy is really, that knowledge is paramount to being able to really understand who you are and where you are, and maybe even decide how to change, how to be. For me, my students tell me that I'm just full of trivial knowledge or trivia, and it's because I try to learn as much as I can, and I try to actually, be an example of what I'm talking about. I mean, it's been a few years, not very many, but I go back to school. Well, I went to undergraduate, then I got a graduate degree, then I went back and got a teaching certificate, then I went back and got other teaching certificates, and then I went to law school, passed the bar, and became an attorney. And so my son saw me as he was growing up, constantly educating myself and always learning, and I think that's something we have to do. And so when Alisse talks about ending at 13, I would say, why end ever?
Exactly.
That you're constantly, and I believe that part of that educational philosophy is you learn by teaching. And so, as you pointed out, like you learned something just recently from one of your students, I feel like I learned from all my students, regardless of their age.
Right. Absolutely.
Or knowledge, actual knowledge. I always learn something.
And where do you see that philosophy coming from in the Torah or in early Jewish knowledge? It seems that there's a high percentage of Jewish people that are teachers and have that philosophy. So do you see that going back to any area in the Torah?
Well, I mean, on a certain level, just commandments tell you to teach. I mean, one of the main commandments is teach your child. When we say that, daily prayer.
Right. And to always think about the mitzvot.
Right.
About the commandments.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the commandments are positive commandments about the way we should treat other people. That, there are a lot of Jewish do-gooders out there too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really commendable. And I want to emphasize that in my teaching of especially young children. Perform a mitzvah a day. It's not hard, and it really makes your day much more pleasant. That whole pay it forward concept. If you do something nice for someone, then they will be encouraged to do something nice back for someone else.
Right, and also the idea that you doing something is to your benefit. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you do a mitzvah, who are you doing the mitzvah for? In a sense, you're doing it for yourself, even though it may be related to somebody else. It was fun for us to watch our son actually really kind of exemplify that. And even when he was little, he would do something nice, and somebody would offer, like for an adult, and they would offer to pay him, and he said, "Oh no, he wouldn't take it."
No, yeah, right. And he still does probably at least one mitzvah a day. He has a very kind heart.
And he teaches Sunday school.
And he teaches Sunday
Wow.
school. That's how he earns
That's wonderful.
his pin money at school.
Right.
So while he's at college, he's teaching Sunday
He is.
school.
That's good,
Right.
yes.
Wonderful.
Yep. So,
And
it's
when did he start? When did you get him started in the Jewish schools?
well, he started when we moved here. It was just before his second birthday, so about 18 years ago. And he started studying He started his first Jewish learning experience at Beit HaYeladim preschool and loved it. He truly loved it. But he couldn't get in on Fridays. Fridays, Shabbat was very popular. So I started teaching a play group at the temple for mommies, a mommy and me group, kind of, with kids Nathaniel's age and younger. And we had a blast, and I created a Shabbat and learning experience for all the kids and the moms. And many of the moms, didn't have strong Jewish backgrounds, so we learned songs, and we did arts and crafts, Jewish arts and crafts, and every week had a theme, whether it was a Bible story or a holiday. And we also did Jewish cooking. And in fact, they once made lots of kugel for a bar mitzvah. And it was a potluck bar mitzvah, and my potluck thing was kugel, and I sent a small amount home with each kid, and we had a great time. It was really fun. And Nathaniel was at Beit HaYeladim preschool, I think, for 4 years, and loved every minute of it, learned so much. And the rabbis and the cantor were very involved, as were temple members who would come in and volunteer to teach science, and he would come home saying, "We love science."
Right.
Right.
And singing.
And singing, there was a parent who's a professor at UCSB
Right.
who would come in and teach singing, in addition to the cantor. And so he just had these really wonderful experiences and really loved Hebrew school
And
his
we also,
entire life.
when we were very actively involved, we would go to all the events that were proper for someone his age.
Right.
And then he saw us being very active again.
Right,
So
and-
sort of by example too.
Right, and we attended Friday night services very regularly, and unlike many parents, we expected him to, either sit or stand quietly throughout the service. And of course, his favorite part was the Oneg Shabbat. But he couldn't go to the Oneg Shabbat if he wanted to go run in the hallway with the other kids, then we would leave. I explained to him at a young age, we come to temple because we enjoy the service, and I can watch you running around at the park. So if you want to stay for the Oneg, we have to stay for the whole service. And he would stay, and
But he would participate.
He did.
And one of the things they always called the young kids up to do the kiddush, for example, or some part of the service.
It was the kiddush. Yeah.
Yes, right. And he would get up there, and it didn't matter how old he was, he would belt it out
This little cup of grape
with
juice.
a little cup of grape juice.
Yeah.
And so he got learned to be comfortable at a synagogue, and that it was just part of what you did.
I remember seeing him at the, I think it was the confirmation graduation, where he stood up there with all the other young adults that were moving on and graduating high school. And there was just this proudness about them and this regalness. And, it was a big accomplishment to
Right.
go through that and to go into the world with that background. I think that it showed a great sense of pride and wonderful to feel that way about anything.
And I think the other important thing for me that relates to is, he knew a lot of those people that were up there with him, the other kids with him, since they were in preschool. And so it's like they had their own community. And to me, that's part of what you teach. I mean, you be part of the community. You don't just do the studying, the learning on your own, the ritual. You do it as part of the community. And I think he's learned that. And I think we were successful. That's at least one of the things we're successful in giving him.
Yes.
Yes, it's wonderful. And is he now involved at his college? Is he in?
He's not as involved in the university as we would like him to be. I think part of his problem was it was in order to get to Hillel. Unlike here, where Hillel is so accessible to UCSB students, it was a 2-bus ride from the dorm where he was living to Hillel. And he goes to school in Seattle, which is very hilly, and it's a first schlep, as we like to say, to get up and down all the hills between his dorm and Hillel.
Right. Well,
But
maybe by
he does
next
plan
year.
on going to Israel in the summertime. He hopes to go to Israel in the
Has
summer.
he been there yet?
No, he hasn't.
Have you guys been there?
Oh yes, yes,
Number of
Really?
times.
yeah.
Well, for one thing, the first year of our graduates program that we went to Hebrew Union College is in Jerusalem.
Right.
You went together?
No,
No, we were
I
different
went.
times.
No, I was a couple of years ahead of him.
And so,
But I went for high school, part of high school, part of my undergraduate years,
Right,
and then for
right, and then
For
I
Hebrew
went
Union College.
for, besides Hebrew Union College, the camp movement, when you had a program where they wanted to have a lot of the senior counselors go.
right.
And so, because I'd been doing it for a while, I was one of the ones picked to go.
Wow.
So, and it was nice. But, when I went to at HEC, but I went early also, because I wanted to work at archaeological digs and do things with the universities.
Wow.
So I was there 14 months, I think,
Right.
that one time.
And I've been back, a number of times since, just for visits, but unfortunately not in the last 20 years, which is
Right, and I
Pretty
have had the
silly.
bad luck. I often got hired by the National Federation of Temple Youth to lead tours. They did. They kept hiring me, and any year they had an intifada, that's when they would hire me. So that they kept canceling them.
I did take a group of 16-year-olds to Israel for 6 weeks.
Wow.
And that was a great experience. It was also a learning experience both for me and for them. It was fun.
And how do you think going to Israel and making that journey affects your knowledge and your orientation of Judaism?
Well, I think for me, the first time I went when I was 15, it was at that age where I, really did not want to keep attending Hebrew school. I was in 10th grade by then. And, but it brought the Hebrew to life. I had learned prayers, I had learned how to read stories and answer questions about stories, but that's when the modern spoken Hebrew came to life, and I really fell in love with Hebrew and used it, whenever and then I wouldn't hear about dropping out of the high school program.
For me, it was a little. I first went when I was junior or senior in college. So I'd already been a great reader of historical books on Judaism and philosophy of Judaism. And so for me, when I got there, to see the places I've been reading about, and when I went over the seminary with the Hebrew Union College, one of the things I was determined to do was read the Bible in as many different languages as I could. So I actually, at that time, knew German also besides Hebrew. So I read it, the whole thing through, not the Torah, the Bible, in Hebrew first, in German, and then English. And it just brought alive in a way that was just different. It could be any language, but Hebrew made it better.
Yeah, Hebrew is a very special language.
When I was teaching at City College, I taught Hebrew at City College for almost 7 years. Unfortunately, we had major budget cuts in the state, so that job no longer exists. But it was such a great joy to teach college kids to speak Hebrew and to be able to pass on my love for Hebrew to that generation, and it was a wonderful experience.
And were those mostly kids that hadn't had a background in that at all, or they had it when they were young?
Not everyone was Jewish who took the class. About a third of the students were usually not Jewish. Many of them wanted to learn to read the Bible in the original, and so they wanted to learn Hebrew for that purpose. Some students did have Hebrew backgrounds, from Hebrew school or day schools, and some were doing it because they knew that their grandmothers would be happy.
Nice, that's a good reason.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
And we're almost out of time here. We have about a minute left. Do you any advice or words you'd like to give to the young people out there in terms of how to pursue an education, or what to look for and what to go forth with?
Well, for me, there's always something to learn.
Always.
You can always find something you want to learn. So go do that.
And for me, I think parents need to look at synagogue education, especially, as a supplement to what they do at home. I think what happens in Jewish homes, for me as a teacher, is as important, if not more important, than what we're able to do at the synagogue. That we supplement what parents do at home. And so, I'd encourage parents to learn too.
Well, good. Well, we try to do that here at Jewish Life, and that's why we're so excited about doing the show and having people like you on, and
Thank you.
getting further educated and a little deeper knowledge of the process of learning, and really appreciate having you both on. And
Well, thank you for having us.
yeah,
It's our pleasure.
Thank you, and come back anytime and have a new project or do some new classes, some new Hebrew classes. Maybe we could do a class on that.
Well, I'm starting a new adult class on Wednesday evening, so if
Really?
anybody's interested.
Where's that going to be?
Well, it's through the synagogue. They can call the synagogue,
Nice.
call Congregation B'nai B'rith for information.
Wednesday night.
Wednesday nights.
Excellent. Well, that's it. We're out of time. Thank you for joining us. You've been watching Jewish Life. I'm Susie Kaufer. We'll see you next time.